I'm reading a few passages from Between Saints and Sinners, Understanding Men. It's a book by Dr. Kamran Ahmed. Now, Dr. Kamran Ahmed is a clinical psychologist, and he has been working for almost 3 decades. He has been working on men's issues since 1991. He has worked for United Nations as well as for World Health Organization. And men can benefit from this book, whether they are Pakistani or South Asian or from the South Asian diaspora. But as Dr. Ahmed makes it very clear on page 18, that, quote, "This book is not about ultimate truths. It is instead an invitation to think about things differently. It is an invitation to reflect upon various aspects of our lives and our relationships. It is an invitation to start connecting dots, new and old, visible and invisible, to give depth and wholeness to the picture that we live in. For it is this picture that defines who we are. And since there are no absolute truths in this book, there are many ideas here that you would disagree with. At least I hope that you would. That would mean that you are engaging with what I say." Unquote. So the first passage that I'm going to read is from page 79, and it runs till page 81. It's chapter 6, A Hero with a Different Face, Honoring Our Fathers. Now these are a few lines that Dr. Ahmed wrote for his father on Father's Day. Quote, "I grew up with Marvel comics. I loved superheroes. Thor was my favorite. When I grew up, I got to know Joseph Campbell and read of the hero's journey. These were people, mostly men, who left their homes and traveled to far-off places in search of adventures and quests, fighting dragons and monsters, risking their own lives and returning home with the treasure, or the fair maiden, or having saved all humanity. I grew up wanting to be like these marvelous heroes. My own father, however, was nothing like these heroes. Day after day, he used to go to his job and return home tired. Working for Pakistan International Airlines, he would go to the airport and do his shifts, his repetitive and tiresome work endlessly. He would make sure the planes were airworthy. That was all there was to his job. And he continued doing it year after year after year for over 40 years. I wondered how he could live a life that repetitive, that boring. Was there really no spark in him? Was there no desire in him to go off on adventures, taking risks, and meeting monsters and fair maidens? He seemed nothing like the marvelous heroes that I idolized. My father is 95 now. Over the last few years, as I pieced together his youth from his own recollections and stories from the extended family, I realized that before his marriage, he had medals from FC College Lahore and from other places, in swimming and diving, in boxing, and in marksmanship. Even after his marriage, he used to love driving jeeps over sand dunes in his first job in the Thal Development Authority. But then came the children and the responsibilities. Then came the need to provide a safe and secure environment to raise the children, the need for a steady flow of resources, a steady income, to provide the best he could for his family. I was the last child. By the time I came, the jeeps were all gone. They were replaced by a family car, a Volkswagen, and the diving and boxing were replaced by the night shifts at the airport tarmac. He would come home tired, but then would lie down with my sister and me on his 2 sides, reading to us from books or telling us stories. In the middle of the story, he would often get sleepy and the story would stop making sense. We would laugh and wake him up. Again and again. We would tell him what he was saying and he would laugh with us and continue with the story again. There was no annoyance from his side, never. He never told us that he loved us, but he never had to. We always knew, always. He worked day shifts and he worked night shifts, making sure there was always money to pay our fees and always food on our table, and making sure there was money left over for fun projects and vacations and Time Life books. It is only now, towards the evening of my own life, that I realize that there are many different kinds of heroes. There are the flashy and glitzy heroes that I looked up to in my youth. But then there are the silent and discreet heroes who sacrificed so much of what they liked to do, of what they wanted to do, for the sake of others they love. They do not live out all their dreams so that those they can love can realize theirs. It is their quiet sacrifice, day after day, year after year, that turns them into heroes who have the courage and devotion to live their lives for others. As is common with us humans, it is when things fail that we appreciate what it takes to keep them functioning. I was reminded of the quiet heroics of my father and many others like him when a PIA plane recently went down killing scores of people. But what if he was not in engineering? What if he was a janitor? What if he was in accounts? All those who work honestly day and night to make systems run, systems that we count on, systems that we rely on, systems that sustain our lives, they are all our quiet heroes. So I honor my father, not for being a Marvel hero, but for knowing what it takes to put someone else's needs and someone else's welfare above his own. So I honor my father, not for being a Marvel hero, but for knowing what it takes to put someone else's needs and someone else's welfare above his own, for knowing how to sacrifice, for watching a little bit of himself die every day so that others may live their lives to the fullest." Unquote. The next passage that I am reading is from chapter 15, Marriage Until Death Do Us Part, Caught Between Love and Death, and it runs from pages 144 to 146. Quote, "For a man, he usually has a full life outside of marriage also. What I find with some men, especially in Eastern cultures, where many times their wives do not have as much of a life outside of the family, they feel burdened by the demands from their wives for more and more time and attention. The wife often feels that the husband needs to fulfill all her needs, social, intellectual, creative, emotional, and physical, which is not realistically or humanly possible for any one partner. My suggestion to the husband is to encourage his wife to have as much of an independent life outside of the marriage as possible. Of course, some men feel insecure and threatened by that, and then they get caught up in a catch-22. If I am approached by the wife, my suggestion to her is to take as much responsibility for her life as she can, and not burden her relationship and her partner with unrealistic expectations. A person needs fulfillment on many levels, and it is unfair to expect any one person to gratify all of one's needs. It is convenient for her often to blame the unmet needs of her life not only on her marriage, but also on him. But then there are men who really seem to have no space in their lives for wives or children. Here I am not talking of men who struggle to make time for the family, given their job or business requirements. I am referring here to men who are into social work or religion, or creative or intellectual work. An uncle of my father was very highly respected for the brilliant research books he wrote. He would spend time in libraries around the world in the process of writing these books. What many did not know is that it was his wife who taught in schools all her life to earn money and take care of the family, almost without any support from him. And then there was a dear friend of mine who was a social worker and a philanthropist, with everyone loving him for his contributions to the community. He was out of the house most of the time, being an avid traveler. Again, it was his wife, never knowing when he would or would not show up at home, who worked all her life and raised their daughter almost single-handedly. Though more common in men, there are times when one sees this pattern in women also, who are so lost in their art or poetry that they have no space in their lives for a relationship. Every once in a while, however, one has the pleasure of seeking someone who is devoted to a cause, creative, social, intellectual, or spiritual, but has enough maturity to not engage another in a marital relationship, knowing that there is no room in their lives for that kind of a relationship. It is of course easy for me to say that a person should think carefully of whether they do or do not want to get married to start with. The pressure for men and women to marry comes from all directions. Not marrying is not an easy choice, especially for women, in the more traditional cultures. We talked about how so much of a women's lives seem to revolve around who they marry, At times, they also marry to get out of the restrictions of their unmarried life. These can be there because of the conservative values of her family. These can also be there just because she's an unmarried woman. Did the late Prime Minister of Pakistan, Benazir Bhutto, get married when she got married because she really wanted to, or because it was an unspoken requirement for her before she could take on the highest office in a Muslim country? As for the reasons why men want to get married, in the more socially segregated and sexually repressed societies, there is one very real pressure that not many talk about. They just want to get laid." Unquote. The next passage is from Chapter 9, Repression of Romance and Sexuality. It is from pages 105 to 106. Quote, "I will go off on a brief tangent here. In the case of single mothers, or in situations where the father is almost absent, it is much harder for the boy to go through the process of consolidating his gender identity. Sajida Bhatti was a single mother, heading a research organization, and raising a son and a daughter alone. The husband who had started the organization with her had died many years ago. Her son, the elder child, was now 15 years old and was really acting out. As is not uncommon, he refused to come for therapy, saying he did not have a problem. She, however, did come to see me a few times to explore how she could better manage this phase. Upon exploration of the issues around which the son was acting out, it became clear that he was going through the transition of becoming a man. He had gone from being very close to his mother to now being rude to her. After a few sessions with me, she started to set broad guidelines, but pulled back otherwise, to give him enough space to grow into the image of masculinity that seemed appropriate to him. After about 2 years, I met her in a different setting, and she briefed me quickly on how, once he was comfortable with himself, he reconnected with her emotionally, but in a more mature, more grown-up way. What Sajida did with her son required a mother who was very secure in herself, not to depend on a close relationship with the son to give her a sense of purpose and meaning in life. And it also meant having a big heart, as it is not easy to have a teenager that you have done so much for be rude to you. If, however, she had been insecure and dependent on the relationship to give her a sense of purpose, she would have used emotional blackmail, clinginess, or her power and position to retain the closeness. The son in that case would either have remained a mama's boy or rebelled with anger and bitterness. Either case is not desirable or healthy. The former case of the son becoming mama's boy is quite common in Pakistan. If there is not much else going on in the lives of the women to give them power and purpose, they are not willing to let their sons individuate in terms of gender or otherwise. In these cases, many times men never really individuate enough from their mothers. It is usually their wives who pay the heaviest price for that." Unquote.